What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 17 top 20 quarterback rankings. Merry Christmas to you guys. I will just say before I jump into the rankings, in Week 17 here, in your fantasy championships, you're going to want to trust your gut. So if you want to use these rankings, I think that's great. Obviously, I'm going to give you guys what I think are the best calls. But if some guys are close here and you have a strong gut feeling that, you should go with this one guy over the other one, I do think you should trust that this week. You don't want to lose on a call that wasn't your own. So I put in the work here. If you want to trust these rankings, I'm confident in them. But, I do think if it comes down to it, close calls, you should be going with your gut this week. Let's just dive right into the rankings here. As per usual, tier 1, very, very strong. Number 1, I have Lamar Jackson. Number 2, I have Josh Allen. These guys have pretty much been flip-flopping all season long. Number 1. Number 2, Lamar Jackson, just super consistent, playing today on Wednesday, 20-plus points in 8 of his 9 games. Then I have Josh Allen going up against the Jets. Had a down Week 16, but we can't really tank him down the rankings. In his previous 2, he put up 51.9 and 41.3. So if you have those two, they're obviously locked in your lineup. Then I have Jaden Daniels going up against the Falcons. Strong start to the season, kind of struggled in the middle. He's been on an absolute tear in his last 4 games, 23 plus in all 4 of them. Also a plus matchup here against the Falcons, who are top 7 in points per game allowed to the quarterback position. And then my final guy in this tier, Joe Burrow, going up against the Broncos. Not a great matchup, but Burrow has just been playing at an insanely high level. He has thrown for at least 3 passing touchdowns in each of his last 7 games. Just a crazy stretch here. Tier 1, very, very strong at the quarterback spot. Now looking at tier 2, this is kind of just like the Jalen Hurts tier. We don't know if he's going to play this week, recovering from that concussion. When he's been healthy, though, averaging 22.2 points per game. Think he's a great play if he can play. We just don't know if that's going to be the case this week, as of right now. Moving into tier 3, going to start off with Baker Mayfield going up against the Panthers. The Panthers are allowing the 6th most points per game to the quarterback position. Baker's put up 28 and 22.3 in back-to-back games. Had a couple of, rough performances, prior to the last 2, but he's turned it around. Obviously had a great start to the season. Evans playing at a high level. He has the running backs. You have Jalen McMillan kind of breaking out here. So Baker, like him as a top 6 play. Then I'm going to go with Bo Nix going up against the Bengals. The Bengals, we all know this is a great matchup for opposing quarterbacks. They are top 4 in points per game allowed. And Bo Nix is coming off a solid Week 16 against a pretty good Chargers defense where he put up 21 points. So I do think this is a good spot for Bo. Then I'm going to go with a couple of guys in the same division. First off, we had Jared Goff going up against the 49ers. He has been playing at a super high level in his last 3. He's put up 22 plus points in all 3 of those matchups. He's averaging 371 yards per game and has thrown for 11 touchdowns. I think the injury to David Montgomery, the injuries on the defensive side, is just going to put more on the plate of Jared Goff, which should be leading to more fantasy production. Then also in that division, Sam Darnold going up against the Packers. It's not a good matchup here. They are allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to the quarterback spot, but Sam Darnold has been pretty consistent, 19 plus points in 5 of his last 6. Even in a tough matchup, I still view him as a top 10 play this week. And then to close out tier 3 and my top 10, I have Anthony Richardson going up against the Giants. Since he regained the starting job, he's averaging 19.4 points per game. And a big part of that production, he's still, not super efficient through the air, just in terms of his completion percentage, not going to be a high volume passer, but it's his production on the ground. Since getting that starting job back, he's averaging 51 rushing yards per game and has 5 rushing touchdowns. Like the matchup here against the Giants, should be a game where they're leading, putting up some points. I don't see why that rushing's not going to be there this week. Then looking at tier 4, a couple of guys who have been kind of hit or miss this season, and as of late, I have Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy. So for Kyler here, the Rams are allowing the 9th most points per game, and Week 16 wasn't some sort of amazing performance, but it was his best game since Week 10. And then for Brock Purdy, going up against the Lions here, the Lions are top 11 in points per game allowed. You'd expect that to be a little bit of a softer matchup than what we see on paper because of all the injuries they've had, especially as of late. The defense, obviously very banged up. And then for Purdy, he's had a couple of really rough games in the last 2-3 outings, but he has still put up 18 plus in 5 of his last 7. So I still think Purdy is an interesting play here. And then tier 5, we're going to start off with Jordan Love going up against the Vikings. Jordan Love had a strong start to the season. as of late has not been that great. He has not hit 20 points since week 11. I honestly think a lot of it is, Josh Jacobs just kind of taking a ton of touchdowns. Early on, those touchdowns were going to Jordan Love. Last year, they were going to Jordan Love. Now, a lot of those are kind of getting shifted over to Josh Jacobs, which is obviously not going to be great for Jordan Love's fantasy value. Also, just going up against a good Vikings defense. Not saying he can't put up points, but he just hasn't been giving you like that high level production recently. Then I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes going up against the Steelers. Tough matchup here. They are bottom 4 in points per game allowed. Week 16 did have a strong performance, was his third best game of the season. He just hasn't been this super high level producer. I do think you could make the argument that he could have a nice close here. Hollywood Brown back in the lineup. Xavier Worthy, seems to kind of be breaking out here late in the season. So maybe that helps carry him to a better fantasy day. But I do think he's in that fringe QB1 area this week. Then I'm going to go with Justin Herbert going up against the Patriots. The Chargers are top 10 in implied points. Herbert had a nice week 16, 22.2 points. And I think what was most interesting for me in that game was you're hoping he's kind of getting healthy here because he had 8 carries for 28 yards. When he was going on his nice stretch, kind of towards the middle of the season, a lot of that was helped out by his rushing. Not a quarterback who's going to go out there, rush for 600 plus yards a season, but he's a super athletic dude. And if he can use his legs, is healthy enough to do it, that's just going to give him, a little extra boost from a fantasy perspective. And then we're going to close out this tier with Matthew Stafford going up against the Cardinals. He's really struggled in back-to-back games for fantasy, under 10 in both of those. But this does just seem like a pretty nice matchup here against the Cardinals. The Rams are third in implied points, so Vegas thinks they're going to run up the score here. He has the weapons, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. This is an important game for them. I think Matthew Stafford is a fine mid-tier QB2. And then my final tier here, pretty much Tua and then the rookies. Tua going up against the Browns here was going on a nice 4-game stretch. It's kind of cooled off over his last 2. Only put up 3.8 and 12.5. The issue with Tua is that he just has to put up such great passing numbers because the rushing is just non-existent. So the last couple of weeks hasn't really been there. Still think he's a mid-tier QB2 option. And then, like I said, the rookies. Caleb Williams here, it's not pretty with the Bears, but his fantasy production as of late has actually been pretty solid, averaging 20 points per game in his last 5. But like I said, not a good Bears offense. They're bottom 10 in their implied point total. Then I have Drake May. For someone who's not been on a great offense and hasn't had a ton of ceiling games, he's been pretty steady where he's going to be in that 15 to 19, 20 point per game area. He's put up 17 plus in his last 3. Not a great matchup here, but I think Drake May's a fine option, has a little bit of rushing upside in there. Then we're going to close out these rankings with Michael Penix going up against the Commanders. If you played him last week, it was not great from a fantasy perspective. Was 18 for 27, threw for 202 yards, 1 pick. I do think he played better than the stat line would imply. Obviously, the interception was completely not his fault. It was also just not a great game script for a quarterback where the defense was scoring, the run game was working. I think here against the Commanders, they're 4.5-point underdogs. We could see Michael Penix have a much better game this week. Could kind of see a breakout here for him. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 20. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. Later on in the week, you have questions, I'll make sure to continue answering them. And then also, if you guys are interested in, fantasy football content in the offseason, rookies, NFL draft, all that stuff, I will continue posting. So if you want to check in, feel free to do so. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Good luck this week.